What's going on, guys? Welcome back. It's episode 3 of the Huddle Up podcast. I got Hayden with me. As always, we got a lot to talk about, man. We had a great week of NFL. A lot of great games, starting with, of course, we already talked about it, but that Lions-Packers game. We had Bills-Rams. That was a heck of a game. A couple overtime games. The Jets game. The blocked field goal by the Saints, of course. That was pretty insane. Steelers had a little bit of a scare if the Browns can make a field goal, but it is what it is. Tony fumble as always. He won a ring and then kind of fell off the face of the earth. But a great week of NFL. We got some college football to talk about later on. We got a little UFC action as well that we're going to sprinkle in, so should be a good one. But we're going to start with Bills taking on the Rams. That was the Tom Brady game, the game of the week. Rams took that one 44-42. I've got some thoughts, but I'll start with you as the Rams guy. What were your takeaways? How do you feel about this team after this week?
They looked pretty impressive on offense. We mentioned this is the only game that they've scored over 30 in, besides the Vikings game where they just hit 30. And I guess the offensive expectation this season was pretty high just because they had so much invested, at least financially. I want to say they have the most money invested in the offense, or like percentage-wise. They have the least in the defense, therefore most in the offense. So this is kind of something that they've been waiting on, and they look pretty solid this week against the Bills defense that had been kind of hot this past, I don't know, was it seven or 8 game stretch. But I mean, everyone showed up pretty well. Puka had arguably his best game of the season. Kupp had a vintage performance. Kyron, he looks good, especially after that O-line's been healthy now for a couple weeks in a row. And then Stafford looked like the Stafford we know and expect. But I guess my one takeaway is the defense obviously wasn't. I don't know if they were even in Los Angeles for the game yesterday. It didn't really seem like they showed up.
Yeah, the secondary was rough in the second half. The first
Yeah,
half it was fine
yeah,
for the most
yeah.
part.
They didn't look too bad in the first half. They were limiting, especially some of the plays that they got on Josh Allen. They kind of got some pressure, and they were containing him relatively as much as you can contain Josh Allen. But I guess that's my one takeaway is Verse and Fisk were kind of quiet, and then the secondary was just absolute burnt toast. But yeah, no. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think you hit on it a little bit. But our concern, the reason we picked the Bills, even though we were rooting for the Rams, is because of their inability to stop a mobile quarterback. That proved to be true, but the offense you pretty much hit on all cylinders. It really stepped up for this game. Puka looked like really, really, really good. Just some of the catches he was making, some of the toe drags, I was like, man, he's back to last year's form, at least a little bit. Don't want to, again, you want to not overreact too much to one week, but that's a really good sign, especially going into San Fran. They're on the road for that game on Thursday, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be a big game, but good to see all signs going on the offense for that game. But yeah, I mean, this is a scary team. You have arguably a top 5 quarterback in Stafford with a great coach. You got weapons. I mean, obviously, Kupp was mostly, I don't want to say a non-factor, but besides the touchdown, he was kind of quiet in comparison to Puka at least. But to have him as arguably your wide receiver too, you got a lot going your way. Kyron looked good. He did his thing. I mean, that's a big spot for the Rams. I think that's something to talk about as well. Like, they show up in these big spots, and they showed up. They showed up against a Bills team that hadn't lost since really early in the year. I think the last loss was to Houston, because it went Bills. They lost to the Ravens, and then they lost to Houston, I think, after. It was one of those. But they had been on
Yeah.
like an eight-ish game win streak. So I mean that's huge. That's huge for the Rams. Huge for confidence. That should help them make a playoff push. You would think. But that defense, especially in the secondary, I have confidence in the front seven. They kind of talked about it on the broadcast, but it's a fierce front seven. Verse obviously, doing his thing. He's the front runner, I think, still for defensive rookie of the year. Um, but against teams that have weapons, because the Bills don't really have outside weapons for the most part. Obviously, Amari Cooper's a great veteran. We know what he's capable of, but it's not like he has the same flash they did in Dallas, especially with a new team. And they still kind of got exposed on that front, so that's a little bit concerning. But I mean, I don't know what defense when the Rams are really firing. I don't know what defense is going to be able to slow them down if they were to make the playoffs. Besides maybe Philly, which deserves credit because they did slow down the Rams a lot. But um, I would trust McVay to make some adjustments in that matchup if that really happened. Um, but yeah, there are definitely concerns for Buffalo. I mean, seeing a defense show up the way they did, not ready to play at all. I mean, I heard Colin Cowherd make this point, who he's obviously hit or miss with some takes, but you never see the Chiefs have like the Chiefs show up to play, even if they lose, like you're just gonna beat the Chiefs. The Bills defense just did not show up, and that's a little bit concerning as you go into the playoffs and you go into December and January games. You gotta show up every week. Every game's gonna matter, and when you get in the playoffs, there's no room for error. So that's definitely something to look out for, but you don't want to overreact. The Bills have been solid. Um, I'm sure they're going to keep doing their thing. They've got the division pretty much under wraps, maybe officially. I can't remember. Um, so it'll be interesting. Um, the next game I kind of want to talk about a little bit was Falcons Vikings. I believe we were on different sides for this game if I look back. Yeah, you were on the Falcons. Um, that game, the main takeaway I had was the Vikings are here, and I don't think they get enough credit. I don't think they get talked about enough. I think they're kind of like the Steelers for me in that way. The Vikings got love or hate Sam Darnold. He's playing. He's obviously not going to win the MVP. That being said, he's playing like an MVP level quarterback. He's outplaying Mahomes this year without question. They got arguably the best receiver in the league. You could say top two. If you really want to put Jamar over him, which is fair. Um, they got a great defense led by Flores, which is balling, giving Kirk a lot of problems. That's another point as well. What are the Falcons going to do at quarterback now? I mean, Kirk has not looked good the last 2 weeks. I think a combined 6 or 7 picks. Do you think they go to Penix soon? Do you think they go to Penix next week, or do you think they just roll with Kirk?
I don't know. That whole situation didn't really make sense when it was happening, and it still doesn't. Just because Penix is obviously I think he's 25 as a rookie, and so he doesn't have maybe a lot of time to just sit around. And the contract that they gave Kirk was massive. I don't know if Kirk, if he's like a candidate for another team to like a QB needy team to go to, but even then, I don't know if you'd want Kirk Cousins. I think he's at 8. It's the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's 8 picks and 0 touchdowns. So it's
Yeah.
looking pretty. It's looking pretty rough. I personally would probably go to Penix. I don't see them surpassing the Buccaneers. To be honest, I think the Buccaneers are just flat out better. Um,
I kind of agree with that. Yep.
yeah, I don't know. I think you just try and see what you have in Penix, and then you can kind of make a decision from there. But I don't know. They kind of went high for him in the draft, and it's just an odd situation. I, I just don't know if benching Kirk is the smartest decision, only because he's making so much money. But at the same time, maybe you protect the asset and then can move him in the offseason. It's just so much money. I guess I'd say start Penix and see what you got. He's been sitting for 13, 14 weeks now, so
Yeah.
he should be capable. But yeah, what do you think on that?
I think it seems like to me they're not one of those teams where the locker room is falling apart and you need to make a QB switch. So I don't see them. I think they roll with Kirk one more week at least. It wouldn't shock me. I don't know who they have next week, but if they were to lose that game, especially if it's like a divisional game, it would not shock me at all to see them go away from Kirk. Kind of for the reasons you said. I mean, they drafted a QB high, and the Kirk Cousins thing is not working. He does have a no trade clause, but I'm
Damn.
sure Kirk would waive that if they said, "Yeah, we're not gonna play you. We're pivoting here." Um, I mean, Penix has a lot like rookie quarterbacks. We've been kind of seeing this trend where they haven't played early and then they, come back to form at some point. Like you see Bryce Young, he struggled early, got benched. I obviously know Penix hasn't necessarily played, but the main point is he's been sitting and learning. And so I think that can really help. He might not have as much of a adjustment because he's been learning and sitting and kind of seeing how things work in the NFL. But I don't think they do it yet. I think they wait, like I said, at least one more week just to see if they can keep it rolling with Kirk. But I think that Vikings team is pretty legit. And you look at the top of the NFC, they've competed with the top of the NFC. They lost to the Lions on a game-winning field goal. They beat the Packers pretty soundly in Lambeau. That was kind of weird because it was Jordan Love's first game back, but still, you got to take it as it is. They pretty much handled them until the second half. So that's not a team you want to play, man. They got weapons. Addison, Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Hawkinson. That's a heck of a tandem with a quarterback that's playing like an MVP. So that's a team to watch out for. If you're looking for kind of some value on winning the NFC, making the Super. I don't know if they'd be able to win a Super Bowl, but pull off upsets to get to the Super Bowl. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. I don't know if I'd necessarily bet on it, but it's something to watch out for. So we'll see. We'll see what Minnesota can do. I trust the coaching as well. Kevin O'Connell, he's been there before. He's been to the playoffs with a lot of different pieces. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. The other game, the last game I kind of wanted to touch on, and then we'll kind of get into our picks. Let's see. Yeah, that Chiefs-Chargers game last night. Little dark magic once again from the Chiefs. You can call it luck. You can call it, just them playing winning football. They controlled. It was interesting because they really controlled that first half, and then back-to-back touchdowns for the Chargers, and they get the lead. I mean, I think everyone thought that game was over, especially after the Herbert injury. It looked suspect for the Chargers for a second, and then they rallied back. Do you kind of have a takeaway on either team from that game?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know if I think the Chiefs' offenses look pretty poor this year. I think that's kind of the bigger thing between them and the defense. I think the defense is kind of holding their own. But I want to say that the Panthers game was their highest scoring output at 30, I think, on the season. And so it's like, I just don't know. I mean, I'm not going to bet against Mahomes like we've talked about before, but it is kind of something to keep track of just because, I mean, I know the Chargers defense is pretty solid. And the Chiefs have gone up against some solid defenses, but like the Raiders game that they had the other week, they could barely muster up 19. There's been a few games this year, obviously, where they haven't really been able to score. I think having Pacheco back with Kareem Hunt's definitely like a bonus. But I don't know. Their left tackle situation's kind of bad. The right tackle's not very good either.
Yeah,
And
because
so it's kind of,
Humphreys went out in that game.
yeah. And they had to start more or play Morris, who was the guy that they already benched. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, uh, expired goods or whatever. But I don't know. Their offense doesn't look too good. I will say for the Chargers, I think that was a pretty good performance. I think they're obviously one score away from making that a win. think the first half they kind of just looked stagnant, and then I don't know, they were just moving the ball down the field. They were getting some good shots. What's that guy's name? The tight
Palmer?
end. No, the
Oh,
tight end.
Disley?
No, I want to say it's Sharp, 84. Stone Smart.
Okay. Yeah.
He
Yep.
was he was balling for them, and
Yes.
they kind of have people just stepping up in spots. I know they didn't have McConkey this game, but Quentin Johnson looked pretty good this game. He survived a couple of big hits on catches. I think one was for a touchdown too. So
Yeah.
they, I think the Chargers are a pretty solid team. Obviously have a good tackle duo, and then the defense has a bunch of good young corners, and then an experienced pass rush. So they're probably not a team people want to face in the playoffs either. I just don't think that they have enough on the offensive side of the ball to kind of keep up with the likes of like a Bills team or even the Steelers. Honestly, I think the Steelers have a better offense. But overall, I think it was as positive as a loss you can have. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this year one Harbaugh Herbert Chargers experiment overall is going really well. I mean, they don't have weapons and they're winning games and they're fighting games, and that defense is top three. I mean, I don't think that's a I think they're that defense is really good, especially in the red zone. They do not give up touchdowns. It's pretty crazy. I forget like the exact stat, but it's like the Chargers, they don't you don't want to let teams in the red zone on purpose, but they kind of play conservative-ish in comparison to some teams. And then once you're in the red zone, they like it happened in the first half of that Sunday night football game they had against the Bengals. They really like I think they got in the red zone like 3 or 4 times in the first half or something crazy. And every time in the first half it was a field goal, I'm pretty sure. So they really, against elite offenses, which I know the Chiefs are not, but just to talk about the Chargers a little bit, they do a really good job in the red zone, which helps in the playoffs. They just don't have the weapons. It would be really interesting to see them get. I don't know if they could afford a guy like T. Higgins, but even if they drafted someone to be this, another wide receiver one, wide receiver two ish, depends on how you look at McConkey there, right? I think I don't know if he's really a wide receiver one. He is solid, but one might be a stretch. They do have to figure out a solid run game too. I think they talked about it on the broadcast a little bit, but in that first half, it felt like they had like it was all on Herbert to make throws to wide receivers and maybe tight ends, and that was it. Running backs weren't getting yards running the ball. They weren't catching passes, so that'd be interesting to see them get a guy like the Texans did with Mixon, if they really wanted to compete. Maybe stretch, give it a little bit of a stretch, and pick up a guy like that. Um, but I mean, definitely not a team you want to play in the playoffs. I just feel a little bit differently with them in comparison to like the Vikings, just because you've got the quarterback, they've got Herbert, but offensively, it's very hit or miss. That Atlanta game last week, I mean, Kirk threw 4 picks and they barely escaped against an Atlanta defense that did not look great against Minnesota. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a next year thing for him. But if an offense doesn't show up against the Chargers, I mean that could be a playoff loss for a team that they wouldn't expect. But as for the Chiefs, I think they're so frustrating sometimes because they it they have guys on offense now. They got Pacheco back. They have D Hop. I wish they would use Worthy a little more. It is what it is. I think Worthy's a great talent. They just need to figure out how to get him in space with that speed. But we'll see what happens when they get Hollywood Brown back. But at that point, it feels like there's no excuses for that Chiefs offense. They got to score more than 19 points. They got to get in the end zone a little more. I mean, with 19, what they scored once, one touchdown. I mean, like that. You got to do a little better than that. But you're never going to go against Mahomes. I'm never going to for pretty much in my life. So um, that defense looked great in the first half. Kind of didn't show up in the second half. Um, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. I mean, it looks like they're going to have home field now, especially with the Bills' loss. That looks pretty set in stone at this point, which is huge for them. They have a great home field advantage. But it's hard for me to, even though I believe in them, it's hard for me to put them at like the number one spot when it comes to Super Bowl favorites. I think you still got to give that to Detroit, even Buffalo. But it's a pretty open league right now. We'll see what happens. That's a beautiful thing about the NFL. Once you get to the playoffs, anyone can win on any given Sunday. So we'll see what happens with the Chiefs and all the other contenders in there. Let's go through our picks real quick. I sent you the list right before this. As we're recording this, my third game of my favorite three picks for the week is still pending, so we'll see what happens there. Yours went 1 and 2. Obviously, the Bills, I felt like that was the right side of the bet, just unfortunately didn't work out. What happened with that Cardinals game?
Oof. I think, I don't know, maybe this is an overreaction, but I don't think that Kyler Murray is the guy. For whatever reason, they always start off hot, and I'm calling it the Kingsbury curse, but
Yeah.
every year they start off hot. Like I saw them scorch the Rams. They were putting up big numbers. They had like a 4-game win streak against like the Jets and a couple other teams, but I don't know if Seattle just owns them this season or what, but he's looked god awful against Seattle. He's missed Marvin Harrison on a bunch of routes that he's been open on. And the defense didn't show up yesterday either, which I was kind of surprised by. But overall, I'm starting to question the Cardinals. Obviously, as a Rams fan, I kind of, I guess, see them a little bit more often than the average NFL fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't look hot yesterday. I don't know. I thought that this was going to be kind of like a year where maybe they kind of assert things, and the next year they kind of get some pieces going. But I just, man, I don't know. He didn't look good. Like the picks that he had yesterday were just terrible. Like they were like Kirk Cousins against the Chargers terrible, where he's just like floating balls, not seeing the linebacker, and I don't know. They always find a way to collapse around this time of year, like every single year in the last 4 or 5, I want to say. I don't think they've made the playoffs outside of the year they got nuked by the Rams in the Rams Super Bowl year. But I don't think it's a coaching problem. I just don't think that they have the talent or the correct talent on offense. I just, maybe that's kind of a harsh reaction to it, but I don't know. I've been a pretty big Murray guy since he's been in the league. I like his skill set, and I think he's kind of proven people that, maybe the height doesn't matter as much at the quarterback position, but like the decision making just hasn't been there, and for whatever reason, like I said, he just can't find Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride is awesome, but Marvin Harrison is your best offensive weapon. I think that's kind of fair to say.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of tape of him just not seeing Marvin for whatever reason, if he's not his first read or what. But yeah, I don't know. Credit to Seattle, because Charbonnet looked like Adrian Peterson yesterday, and the Seattle O-line looked like just amazing, which is the first time that's happened all year. So Seattle's a pretty solid team. I think you got to give them credit. Obviously, they've been balling out the last couple of weeks. They've kind of put together a little bit of a win streak, and they're top the NFC West. So you can kind of look at it from that perspective. NFC West leaders, take down a team like that. So got to give credit where credit is due. But yeah, I don't know, the Cardinals. I don't think that they're going to be a serious in the playoff picture, and even if they somehow sneak it, they're getting bounced fast.
Yeah, I think, and I picked Seattle here. I was pretty confident. I think they're just, I think it says more about Seattle than Arizona to me. I think Seattle is just a really solid roster. with a lot of pieces that is just kind of hitting stride. Even in that Rams loss that they had, I mean, they looked overall pretty good. The Rams had the long pick six. You take that away, and Seahawks come out with that game. So I think the Seahawks are pretty legit. Geno is inconsistent. He's a gritty work ethic guy. The talent isn't necessarily there. It's kind of the reverse of some other guys we see in the league. Like Geno's going to show up every Sunday and give it everything. And yeah, I mean, their head coaching hire, huge for defense. Their defense looks really good, especially against a Cardinals offense that has, like you said, been in strides at some points. Seattle's a team I don't think you want to play either. It's not necessarily on the level of like the Rams and the Chargers and some of these other teams, but they've got offensive weapons. If Geno's hot, like that's a scary matchup. Obviously, that Geno being hot isn't something to bet on, but they've got a run game. They've got weapons on the outside. They have a great front seven, pieces in the secondary. It's just a good team. I just think they outmatched the Cardinals this week, and that proved to be true. But we'll see what happens with Seattle. I think it all rides on which Geno you get on a Sunday. Because if you get the one that's throwing 2 to 3 picks, like you're not going to win. But he's shown he's capable of being a solid quarterback, at least 15 to 20-ish in the league at moments. So definitely a team to look out for. Just too much for the Cardinals this week. But back to your picks. It wasn't great for us overall. You went, again, we're recording this at the time of the Monday Night Football game, so TBD. But you're 4-7 right now, and I'm 5-6. But it's tough to, pick spreads in the NFL. So it kind of is what it is. Just a reminder, we got the Instagram in the description if you want to check out these picks. We give them on the full episodes as well, but we give kind of the list and the rundown in a simple format on Instagram, so be sure to check that out. But let's transition real quick. You hit, and I can't talk as much UFC as you can, but you hit a pretty nice UFC bet that we gotta still put on Instagram. Nice little parlay, 9 legs, 20 to win 200. What were kind of the close fights for that bet, specifically the ones that happened this past Saturday?
Yeah, I will say that I kind of got lucky on the 5th of the 7th leg. It was the Brian Battle versus Randy Brown fight. Randy Brown probably should have taken that one, but I think they gave Battle the decision, which I kind of thought was... I lost my mind when they gave him that decision because I thought the parlay was hosed at that point. But, Shavkat looked kind of solid against Ian Gary. I think it kind of proves Ian Gary's a pretty good prospect himself. I think there was a rumor that Shavkat was fighting with a torn MCL. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I was texting one of my friends, Taylor. He wasn't throwing a single leg kick, and that kind of makes sense.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he kind of looked limited, and he was kind of grappling with Ian Gary a lot in that fight. I don't know. People were kind of overreacting and saying that the champion Bilal is gonna 50-45 Shavkat, but I if there's one bet I could give out to the public, it's Shavkat is gonna piece Bilal on the feet. I don't even think that's a question. I think you're a fool if you disagree with that take, just straight up. But I think the fight to look, or I guess the biggest storyline is Pantoja, the flyweight champ. Against the top 10, he's gotten 9 wins he's beaten 9 of the top 10 in the flyweight division. He's cleaned them out just brutally. He has probably the best chin in the UFC that I can think of off the top of my head, and he dismantled the Risen star, Kaya Sakura, who I was tempted to hedge my parlay on just because he had such a great he's had good performances, but he doesn't have a ground game, and Pantoja took advantage of that. And there was actually, I think there was a video out of another UFC champion who saw or he had like a pretty good perspective of it, but Asakura landed like a crazy knee on Pantoja, and he just ate it like it was literally nothing, and that's just like nuts to me. But finished him on the ground, and there's really no competition left. But yeah, that parlay was pretty. I didn't think it was going to make it through the first couple of fights of the this most recent card because it spanned
Yeah.
from a fight night to UFC 310 just now. But yeah, I got pretty lucky on a couple of those decisions. So
Got to take it when you got it, right?
yeah,
You got the UFC knowledge. That's why we're here. So you got to get lucky. You got to get lucky when you're betting and making picks and stuff like that. It's not all. It's a little bit of both, and it worked out. So I think the next topic I kind of wanted to hit real quick was a little bit. We'll go college football. First, the Heisman debate, and then the new college football bracket that just came out yesterday. I'll start on the Heisman and then kind of get your thoughts. This topic gets me pretty fired up, honestly. I think I I had a bet on Genti to win it for a while now. I've been a fan of his for a long time. I watched him at the beginning of last year, and I knew I've got the receipts before people go crazy for this take. But I saw him play once, and I was like, this guy's that guy. He's legit. This is not some like, oh, he's in a weak conference. Like the guy is just a baller. And when it comes to the Heisman, I think you got to look at who is bringing more value to your team. That's why it's been a quarterback award a lot of these years because the quarterback is the most valuable position. It comes down to what we're seeing in the NFL as well. The MVP is a quarterback award because that is usually the most valuable player on a team. And while Travis is obviously outstanding, he's a heck of a player, an amazing two-way player at both ends. You have to think, well, they have Shador still. They have their defense actually came together to end the year, which surprised me a lot. But you take Travis off that team, I think they're winning maybe one less game. There's been some stat padding on his touchdowns, not completely, but like one of his touchdowns in the Utah game was at the very end. I think he got a pick in that game kind of towards the end. So I don't know. He's a winning player. And he's phenomenal, and he should be if the team picking number one in the draft already has a quarterback. There is no need to be scared, to pick him number one overall. I think he's phenomenal, but the award itself comes down to what are you doing for your team, where's your value, and I think Genti puts his team in a position to win, and he is that offense. I think they win 3 or 4 less games, if not more, without him. Their passing attack is maybe average at best. It's not great. And the numbers he's putting up are phenomenal. He might break not Dickerson's record. That's Saquon in the NFL. Barry
Sanders.
Sanders, Oklahoma State record. Which again, he's got more games played. Totally understand that. But it's still phenomenal what he's doing. Really putting a whole college on his back and producing. And people give the conference argument, which I hear it. I understand why they want to give that argument. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, he's produced against Oregon. It'll be really interesting. I think people are going to be surprised to see what he does in this playoff, especially if they end up playing Penn State. I believe, yeah, that's the matchup. If they were to play Penn State, I don't know if Boise necessarily can win that game, but shoot, I think Genti could have a big game against Penn State, especially with how Oregon's run attack look for the most part against Penn State. Um, that could really, I think the award ceremony will be over at that point. But it'll either solidify my take that he should have been the Heisman winner, or it'll be if he doesn't have a good game, then hey, it is what it is. I'll own it. But I think he's the best player in college football right now. And he, again, I think if you put him on a team, um, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example. Kind of a team on the outside looking in, maybe even like a South Carolina, like
Or
you throw,
Bama.
or Bama. They've got guys. To be fair to Bama, they've got guys. But you throw Genty on a team like that, even in the SEC or whatever it might be, with those offensive line pieces as well. I think he's producing at a similar level. He's got a great ability to cut back. He's strong. He has the most. I think he has the most yards after contact like ever. I heard that today. People think it's again competition. The offensive line's blocking great. Obviously, O line has to play a role when it comes to a running back, but his yards after contact is insane, and he's carrying guys. Again, he's done it against Oregon. Um, Enough of me talking though. Where do you kind of land on the Heisman debate right now?
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I think Genty should win it. I just think his value. I guess that's kind of how they. I don't know. I guess how you define the Heisman, but if it's kind of like the MVP award in football, if it's the most valuable player in all of college football, like you said, I mean, I don't watch a lot of college football, but I don't think Boise State wins much of those games without the 200-yard bombs that Genty's been dropping it. And the other thing too is that he's been sitting out
Yeah.
halves and quarters, so it's like if
Yep.
he was doing the same thing as Travis Hunter, he'd be at 3,000 yards. I feel like that's a pretty comfortable statement to make.
If he played, yeah, really quick, if he played all the snaps, because people talk a lot about Travis Hunter snaps. If Genty played that amount of snaps, which obviously he wouldn't be playing the defensive side, but just take the offense, right? If he's playing the same amount of offensive snaps and getting the ball the same amount of times, you know, I guess it's a little different because it's carries and whatever, but you proportionate, right? He plays in some of those second halves. You're looking at he's probably broken the record already, and then it's not a debate. So
Yeah, but I will say, if there is someone that he would lose to in any year, I feel like it's a worthy opponent in Travis Hunter just because we've never seen anything like it. He's you make the argument that he's the best corner in the draft or in college football. Will Johnson might be there, but Travis Hunter's been playing pretty well. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he's been their wide receiver one, and they have some guys for sure.
they've got a loaded wide receiver room.
Yeah,
Sure.
and for him to be producing at that clip, I know him and Shador are like bros, and they kind of have that kind of a Jamar and Burrow connection where it's like just automatic. But even then, he's still putting up like top seven wide receiver numbers in most categories, and so it's like it's hard to deny. But at the same time, if he was playing, or excuse me, if Genty was playing 100% of the offensive snaps like Hunter is playing, into fourth quarters with a 20-point lead, yeah, I think Genty would have this Heisman wrapped up pretty easy.
Yeah,
He's got like 30, is it 20 touchdowns or like 30 touchdowns this year? It's
I
like
think I
something,
think it's like 30. I was looking at it the other day.
it's like
Hold
just
on.
ridiculous, especially on a team that doesn't really have
Yeah,
much
30, 30.
talent. Boise
30.
State's good, but they don't have, yeah, like 30 is, I,
Pretty insane.
I want to say that's, I don't know, over the majority of touchdowns that they've scored this year. I want to say they've probably only scored 40, maybe 50 if we're being generous. So it's like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, he's putting up that much of an offensive output, and teams know what they're gonna do. Like it's
That's the
literally
crazy part. Yeah,
like if you stack the box, that's not enough. Like you have to bring nine in the box. It can't be seven or eight. I just I've never seen a running back season like this before watching college football, and it's like every single week he's just putting out a nuke of a game, and it's incredible.
yeah. I think, and I want to be fair. I think in this Heisman debate, if we had a quarterback, for example, Dylan Gabriel, if he had a little bit better of a year, if Cam Ward really finished down the stretch, I don't think we'd have too much of a debate. because it is generally a quarterback award, and also like I've said, like you said, like Travis is phenomenal. I think a lot of people with these Heisman debates right now are like trying to discredit Travis. I've never done that. I'm not going to do that. The dude's a baller. I think he should be the number one overall pick. Again, depending on who's picking, but yeah, it's just hard to like you don't see what Genty's doing, and you've seen great running back years, absolutely, but to have a guy that is literally the offense is like they would not be much without him. Really, I mean, they wouldn't be in the playoff. No way. No shot they're in the playoff without him. And I think, and Travis and CU didn't make the playoff. So that's kind of a struggle point as well.
With a much better roster.
With a much better roster. I think if you take Travis off of CU and you put him on Arizona, for example, I think there's still a very good Heisman debate because what Travis is doing is still phenomenal wherever he's at. But I think a lot of it is like the media and Deion Sanders and, just the CU hype train. I think that's a big part of what's going on, which is a little frustrating to me. But it'll be interesting. I think the award's pretty much locked up, but it is a bummer. I would have loved to see Genty win. I think he deserves it, and I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong once we get to the playoff. Especially if it is against Penn State and he has like 150 and 2 touchdowns. I think people are going to be like, "Wow, we might have missed the ball on this one a little bit," specifically the voters. But it is what it is. 2 phenomenal Heisman candidates, so that's all you can really ask for. I wanted to go to the playoff now. Again, I know I watch a little more college football. Love college football. There's a lot to break down here. Obviously, the big headline for most was that Bama did not get in. I thought they shouldn't have gotten in. Because, I mean, they lost 3 games. You can't lose 3 games in a sport where you're looked at for your losses and not your wins. And they lost to Oklahoma, who has no quarterback. They lost to Vanderbilt, who's Vanderbilt. I mean, you can't do that. You can't do that and expect to be still rewarded. SMU, even though they had a much weaker schedule, absolutely. The conference is weaker. And I'm sure, and I think Bama's better, honestly, as a team. I don't think anyone's going to debate that SMU would beat Bama right now. I get it. But you got to reward teams for not losing games in the sport of college football. That's always how it's worked. And SMU went 11-1, lost in a crazy game to Clemson in the conference championship. Obviously, you're not taking that conference championship necessarily into account, but you're looking at them saying, okay, this is a pretty, competitive team. They're solid. They can move the ball. So I thought that was the right decision. The other thing I look at, because I root for my Ducks, the Ducks got a really brutal draw, which did not surprise me at all. I saw this writing on the wall ever since we kind of got some bracket projections, and I knew they'd be in the Big Ten championship game. The 5 seed's the winner, and Texas got the 5 seed. They're going to play Clemson and then Arizona State, which is a very... Again, it is 2 games versus 1. I get the bye. The bye's helpful, but man, I mean, Texas is pretty much a lock to be one of the last 4 teams, barring something crazy happens, which can in college football, but still. It'll be, yeah, I mean, I think overall the committee did a really good job. It's a bummer that Oregon has to play one of 2 really elite teams in Ohio State and Tennessee right off rip. But that's the sport of college football. You're going to get chaos. You're going to get things that don't necessarily go your way because it's a crazy sport and you got so many teams. You can't just do it like the NFL where it's all, math generated, the playoffs. There's no subjectivity. So I'm excited. I think it's a great addition for college football. I listen to a lot of Joel Klatt, who talks about this all the time, but it gets more fan bases involved. One of my best friends, if he's watching this, shout out my guy Jackson. He went to Arizona State, and it gets a whole nother fan base involved in this hunt for a national championship that definitely wouldn't have been last year in a 14 playoff. So it's exciting. I don't know how many upsets are realistically going to happen, but it's going to be fun to watch. Do you have any takeaways on the bracket? Anything you're interested in watching?
Mm, I'm just glad Bama didn't get in. I think Bama fans are super annoying, and like you said,
I agree.
can't be rewarded for having three losses. I know that this is probably a mute point just because of the 12-man playoff, but it's funny. I mean, not really funny, but the I guess the whole argument against FSU last year was that they lost their quarterback and they would have gotten
Mhm.
smoked against a team of one of the top fours, and that's I probably don't disagree with it, but
Yeah.
the Georgia this year they lost Carson Beck. I don't think he's probably going to be playing this upcoming matchup against who are they playing this week, or who are they playing?
They have a bye, so
Hmm.
because they won the conference championship. Now I do think that argument though is interesting because if they would have lost that game, would
It's
they
three
have
losses, right?
moved? Yeah, but they don't count the conference. They said they wouldn't count the conference championships against, your record. So they still would have been in, but I do wonder with the Beck injury if they would have moved him down maybe a couple spots. We're never going to know because they won, which means they got an automatic top four seed. But
Hmm.
it would have been
Yeah.
interesting. It would have been because, yeah, I mean, yeah, last year, which I didn't think Florida State should have gotten in last year. When you have your Heisman quarterback go out, I mean, I don't know. They could have not competed. I
Uh-uh.
mean, no shot.
But
But
yeah, I guess the irony in that. But I'm a big fan of the 12-team playoff. I think they said next year, what is it supposed to be, like 16 or something? I think they're expanding it, or
it might be. I think it's for now, at least
is it 12?
officially, I think it's still 12.
That's good. I think the 12-team playoff is pretty fair, just because if you make it a 16-team playoff, you might as well just make it a top 25 playoff at that point, because it's like you're just getting
Then you're
everybody in.
reaching a little bit. You're reaching a little bit.
Yeah, I think 12 is pretty fair, especially with four buys, and then obviously all the NIL money and all the stuff that they got pumping into this stuff. So it's definitely, financially good, as well as for the viewers. It's a lot more college football playoff, which four teams the last however many years has been cool, but I definitely think the expansion was needed. But I'm excited to see some of these games, especially around the holiday time. Those are always fun to have. I don't know who my pick would be. I don't know. Oregon looks pretty good. The- Um, I know Penn State's not going to win it. Um, Quarterback is Buns. But I don't know. I think there's, there could be like a Cinderella team that kind of makes it through. Um, I know you mentioned Texas kind of got a cakewalk of a schedule, but I mean, Arizona State, I know they played Iowa State, not super high level competition, but I mean, Arizona State, that quarterback looks pretty darn good. And the they have the white version of Jainty with this Scatabo or whatever. He looked pretty
Yeah.
darn good. The defense, I mean, Iowa State was kind of crumbling in that second half and third quarter, but that you never know in these kind of games, especially at the neutral sites, and anything can happen. And I guess that's the fun part of college football, just kind of random in certain spurts. So I'm just looking forward to having some good good games to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my early lean, I thought Georgia looked good enough with Stockton if Carson Beck does not return. I think the way the bracket looks and the way it's set, I lean. I've got some anti-Texas bias just because of how their fans handled the first Georgia game. I think the fans are soft, but it is what it is. Um, I think I mean, Oregon, Texas, if that happens, will be a phenomenal game. I think that kind of, to me, looks like it would be the national championship, per se, just because that'll be, I think, the winner of that game. Of course, both teams would have to make it there, but I think if that was the matchup, I think that's the winner of the national championship. I agree with your points on ASU also. I don't know if they can hang offensively with the Texas defense. They're really, really solid. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of questions about Texas offensively, but that defense is legit. They fly around. They're not hitting quite as hard as Georgia, but it's dang close, especially in that front seven. So I think that's kind of the matchup to watch for. My early lean, bias aside, truly, I think it's Oregon to win it all. I think quarterback wise, weapons on offense. The defense did look a little suspect against Penn State, but I was talking to a couple of friends about it. I mean, when you have Drew making some of the throws that he did up until the end, like that was the best game, no question. Penn State has played all year. They were sharp. I was like, man, they're not missing anything. The schemes are really good. They're getting guys open. Like, no one's really been able to do that against Oregon. So that was really impressive to me. But I don't think it takes away from Oregon's defense necessarily. That's why I brought it up. I think it was just a really strong game plan from Penn State. They were able to run the ball, which is arguably Oregon's weaker spot, if they have one, is run defense. But yeah, with Gabriel and all the weapons, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Ferguson, phenomenal tight end, I mean, they just got guys all over the board. And I think they have to be the favorite at this point. But my dark horse pick, I mean, looking at the bracket, I think I don't like Notre Dame at all. At all. I can't stand them. But they've got a pretty good draw if they're able to beat Indiana. That Georgia game would be tough for them, but I mean, I think Notre Dame wins the quarterback battle right now. And they're as physical as Georgia is, arguably. And so I think that's a team to watch out for. And if they play Penn State, assuming, Boise loses, like pretty easy-ish schedule for Notre Dame if they're able to pull off just the Georgia game. So I think that's like kind of my dark horse team to watch out for to at least make it to that national championship. Tennessee as well, because of their defense. I think if they were to beat Ohio State, I think that defense would give Oregon a lot of problems. I don't know if Nico offensively is competent enough to hang with the Oregon defense, but that would be a really close game. I am not. Yeah, Oregon got a brutal draw. Like they got. I say they're my favorites, but shoot, they could be out real fast. So we'll see, man. Any other final thoughts on the bracket?
I think I'm gonna be pulling for Boise State just because they're kind of even though they're the 3 or 4 seed, and they're still kind of an underdog. But I would love for JT to somehow make it to the championship and just kind of prove his worth to the teams, or prove his worth to the Heisman voters. Like you were saying, Hunter's probably got it in the bag, but
That'd be insane if they were able to pull off, a couple, like just one game. If they won their first game, that would be insane.
Yeah,
insane. I don't know if they can just because of everyone else they have around. But I think the defense is a little under. I think it's fine. I don't think it's some elite defense. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think a team like Penn State would hang like 40 on them. So if the offense with Genty can put up 30, I think it'd be a game.
I agree. I'm hoping for it. So I guess we'll see.
We'll see, man. Well, that'll wrap up episode 3, the Huddle Up podcast. If you made it this far, appreciate you listening. We got everything, our socials in the description. Been going through some technical issues with TikTok and trying to get stuff up, but The Instagram's active right now. We're working on the Twitter, or X, I should say. We're working on the TikTok. So appreciate you guys listening. Follow up on those things in the description, and I think we'll be back probably Thursday. Thursday, we'll see, but we'll get another one out towards the end of the week. So appreciate you guys.
Peace.
Peace.